Hello, everyone. It's me once again, the Existential Designer. I like to come on here and discuss the origins of words and concepts versus factors of reality that might appear to be origin when they're not. And then also some misconceptions people might have. Today's subject matter is on why the president is called the commander in chief. They got everything from two-quarter low-class project themes to something about a chef. I'll explain that chef difference as well. When it comes to my existential designs, there are as many characters as bones of the human body, and that's what they used. When it comes to the first five, which is in six on the overlapping realms theory, the first five are the human being curse phase. But as a total 206, that's just the being phase of all beings and the different fates that they have. But, as human beings then have medical doctor hospitals, the other beings have a pro to their con as well. But when it comes to the rulers of the world, the logistics of owning people, and the rules and laws they make, the United States of America has a president, and then with a vice president. So let me explain where the word president comes from. The notion of the word source, this is just representationals, just example that I drew. But this 16 here, which I then drew here, is very important because the characters there's no characters above the row of L. The row of L is this one here, and there's no characters above there. And that's exactly 364 squares from the row of M to the row of Z. And that's where we get the days of the year with added one or two. Okay. And then when it comes to from this row here, which is R, there are characters here. But the characters where there's no characters that way, but not including the 365, there's 90 squares, and that's after Q for quarters, like the seasons of the month, with winter, fall, and then spring with the P, and then the on and off notion of freedom there in summer with the 2 aside 21U stuff. There's quarters, and that represents space. There's 90. There's 4 90s in a 360. So that's going to be space versus time. But when it comes to that 16 squares, that starts at M with the 3-3, like the flag, and that's going to represent matter. Okay, so you got space up, time, or time up, space and matter. Okay, but when it comes to the rulers of the world and the logistics of owning people and the rules and laws they make, the president comes from the notion of that free area. Now that's 16 squares, but that's 20 spaces around for the beginning and end. PT. Oh, of course, it's written backward, the R notion, so that P is an R. Okay, and that's where you get the notion of the president. Okay, of course, that 20 around is 4 fives. 1, 2, and then the 2, 3, and the 3, 2. That's 4 fives. And that's the Democrat notion in democracy. Okay. And then, of course, the Republicans then again come from the 16R shape. Republicans. Okay. And then president. All right. Now, that is different than, but includes with the vice president of the 3 valleys. Okay, there's 7 peaks, but 3 valleys. And then, everything's it's in reality like theory. So it's backed up by other notions, and then they vote. That's, what we call it. But, again, it would be like how a different state of V would be like that. And then the 9I, and then the 3, and then the 2, 3E, vice president. Okay, and then of course, with the EE, border to border, coast to coast notion of the USA, which is different than other countries around the world. But the executive with the 2 E's on the 3 note and the 9I, and then the executives versus that's the row of J, and the judicial versus the legislative law. Okay, and those are the 2 sides branches. Of course, the H column, very important, that's human being notion. But president is also called commander-in-chief from the 3-3 notion. And the that O is in A when you take that and line in the column of M, middle. For an A, of course, an O and a line to the right is a lowercase a. Okay, but commander-in-chief, and then, of course, the brain, remember, is the blue, not brown, and the 2 sides around the cerebrum, cerebellum, another example, and then command centers and such. All right. So commander-in-chief, president. That's where it comes from. Okay. And of course, the notion of the 6 then and the L with first lady, different than the queen, and then and the king, with the K column on top, the 9I, and then actually there's a friend statement with the ends the two ends free there versus M to Z is 14 ends. So that's why there's 4 ends. All cross-sectioning with those. And then that's the row of G, the last peak. And then that's gold. And the king and queen, they have pounds. Versus the president, we have dollars. Stuff like that. But all the rulers of the world come from the notion. I just wanted to explain president and vice president. Of course, Congress with making bills, that O column right in the middle of the 3-3. Congress making bills and then passing them into law. Stuff like that. So that's where the notions come from. And also, I can explain. Chef simply means, the kitchen stuff you can see then, that would be pork versus chicken versus the 2 E's of beef. Okay? And then, of course, ham has to do with the pork. And then the notion of the M column free squares versus the H row 2 squares and ham. Okay, and then the roast beef and steak versus filet mignon, T-bone, loin chops, stuff like that. It's the word source. It's the stipulation that they vote on things, label them, and group them separately. Okay, that's a lot how the a lot of processes work. Voting, labeling, grouping, so that the different notions are separate entities because it's from a word source. Okay, and the flag, of course, represents the word source with starts at M33 and then the 17-7 and the blue gold notion. And then, of course, the neutrals, L, but then 5 back is H white. Okay, and that's really the notion here. But the chef comes from, I forgot, the chef comes from bending over the islands. And kitchens have the OJ sink. Okay, bathroom then was from the, where the Arab stuff is. And the AB is red-orange. And then the door notions with BA being the monkey, the lowercase b, capital A, and the key stuff. Okay, of course, Caucasians con them all for the dwellings. The dwellings versus voodoo. Okay, versus the designs of genitalia with the J, blue, purple, violet. So there's the 3 body sections, the dwellers, the voodoo, and the designs of genitalia. Okay. But when it comes to the overlapping realms, of course, the OR, overlapping realms, that has to do with monarchies. But the United States of America is about a jaded statement called independent conversion. The U.S. said independent, I, federal, F, constitutional, CO, with the fact, republic. Independent federal constitutional republic. To signify not being occupied by another country. Okay, especially the overlapping realm monarchies. But beside that, the monarchies have the notion of the seat, where it's 16P for P, and then K to Z is the other P. So people, and they voted on standing erect. But when it comes to the IC notion, then the last character is ZB. And that's how you walk. ZB and Fant Dos. And then walking. So it's overlapping realms, but with the independent conversion. So the independent conversion of the U.S. is very important and helps the monarchies all separate from each other as well as the U.S. being free from occupation. But also gets into notions like walking and people. So, it's all from a word source, and they labeled, voted on, and grouped to signify the difference in the things they stipulated on from saying on the word source. So, chef is bending over the counters to make things at the kitchen versus chief, and more on to the commander-in-chief with the cerebral cerebellums and command centers and stuff like that. So, just go with what they voted on for the definition, because it's very complicated, and they had to vote on, label, and group. And they want that. So it's not the backronym that you made up of puns. There's so many words. So when you stipulate on a backronym, an acronym, backronym, pun, you can get it to sound close to something of it. But it is what they voted on.